I'm going to tell you something that'll sound fake, but I swear on everything it's real. Last Thanksgiving, my father stood up in front of 40 relatives at our Dallas house and announced he was cutting me out of the family trust because I'm a disgrace who works at a gas station while my brother runs his company. My mother said they tell people at the country club I died in a car accident because it's less embarrassing than admitting I exist. Then my brother threw a $20 bill at my face and told me it's for gas since that's all I'm good for. I smiled at every person in that room, wished them happy Thanksgiving, and drove away in my 2015 Ford Focus without saying another word. That was November 23rd. Today is January 20th, and my phone has 94 voicemails from my family begging me to call them back because everything is falling apart and I'm apparently the only person who can fix whatever crisis they're drowning in. And you know what? I'm sitting here listening to my father literally sobbing into my voicemail, and I've never felt more satisfied in my entire life. But let me back up because none of this makes sense without context. I'm 27 years old and I'm the younger son in what people around Dallas would call an old money family. Except we're actually new money that acts like old money, which is somehow worse. My father Jeffrey built a commercial real estate development business from nothing back in the 80s, and by the time I was born, he had enough money to pretend he'd always had it. My brother Ethan is 32 and he's been groomed since birth to take over the family business. Perfect grades, perfect college, perfect internships, perfect everything. Then there's me. I was supposed to be the backup plan, the spare heir, whatever you want to call it. Except I screwed up their perfect family photo by being born with a personality they couldn't control. Here's the thing nobody in my family understands. I didn't end up working at a gas station because I'm lazy or stupid or a failure. I have a degree in business administration from a decent state school and I graduated with honors. I worked at my father's company for exactly 18 months right after college. And I learned every single detail of how that business operates. I learned which clients matter, which properties are profitable, which deals are held together with duct tape and prayer. I learned where my father cuts corners, which inspections get pushed through with phone calls to old friends, which bank relationships are actually personal favors wearing business suits. I learned that my brother Ethan is fantastic at schmoozing clients over expensive lunches, but has no idea how the actual operations work. And I learned that my father's entire empire is built on relationships and reputation. And the one thing he values more than money is the family name, not being embarrassed in front of his country club buddies. So when I quit that job 3 years ago and took a position at a gas station on the edge of town, everyone assumed I'd had some kind of breakdown. My mother Christine cried for a week. My father told me I was throwing my life away. Ethan laughed and said I'd come crawling back when I couldn't make rent. But here's what actually happened. I took that gas station job because it's owned by a guy named Zane who went to high school with me and needed help managing the place while he started a second location. The pay is decent. The hours are flexible. And most importantly, nobody from my family's social circle would ever step foot in a gas station on that side of Dallas, so I could disappear from their world completely. For 3 years, I've been the family embarrassment. The son who threw away his privilege to pump gas. The one they literally pretend died rather than admit exists. And for 3 years, I've been watching and waiting because I knew eventually they'd need me. See, when I worked at my father's company, I wasn't just learning the business. I was making copies of everything. Every contract, every client list, every property file, every banking relationship, every single document that showed how that company actually functioned. I have 3 backup hard drives hidden in 3 different locations with every piece of information someone would need to understand or run that business. I spent 18 months being the obedient younger son who filed paperwork and sat in on meetings. And nobody paid attention to me because I was just Jeffrey's disappointing spare kid who clearly wasn't as smart as golden boy Ethan. But I was smart enough to realize that my father never actually taught Ethan how the business works. He taught him how to look good running it. Ethan knows how to take clients to Cowboys games and close deals that my father already set up. He knows how to wear expensive suits and say the right things at Chamber of Commerce meetings. What he doesn't know is how to handle a property development crisis, or which contractors are actually reliable, or which city officials need careful handling, or how to manage the financing relationships that keep everything moving. My father always handled that stuff himself because he's a control freak who doesn't actually trust anyone, including his golden child. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my father had a minor heart event. Nothing serious. He's fine. But it scared him enough that he started talking about transitioning more control to Ethan. Started talking about updating the family trust to make everything official. Started talking about his legacy and the family name and all that predictable nonsense. And this is where it gets good because I knew exactly what was coming. I knew my father would use some family gathering to make a big dramatic announcement about Ethan taking over. I knew he'd use me as the negative example, the cautionary tale, the family failure who proves why Ethan deserves everything. I literally predicted this scene months ago. So, Thanksgiving arrives and we're at my parents' house in North Dallas with the whole extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, my father's business associates, who apparently count as family. Everyone packed into their formal dining room that seats 40 people and probably costs more than most houses. I showed up in my normal clothes, jeans, and a decent shirt because I'm not playing dress up for these people anymore. Ethan's wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000. My mother, Christine, looked at me when I walked in like I'd personally insulted her by existing. My father didn't even acknowledge me. We get through dinner and everyone's drinking expensive wine and laughing at my father's stories. And then he stands up. He's got this huge smile on his face and he starts talking about family legacy and hard work and the importance of maintaining standards. Then he looks right at Ethan and announces he's officially transitioning the business to him and updating the trust to reflect Ethan's position as the rightful heir who's earned everything through dedication and excellence. Everyone claps. Ethan stands up and shakes his hand like they're signing a peace treaty. It's this whole performance. Then my father's expression changes and he looks at me. He says he's also making another change to the trust. He says that I've made my choices clear by throwing away every opportunity one was given and working at a gas station while my brother built his career. He says I'm a disgrace to everything the family name represents. And he's formally removing me from any inheritance because he's not going to reward failure and embarrassment. He says this in front of 40 people while everyone stares at me. Some cousins are smirking. Some look uncomfortable, but nobody says anything. My mother Christine actually stands up next to him and says that she tells people at the country club I died in a car accident 3 years ago because it's less humiliating than explaining what I actually do. She says this like it's reasonable. Like I should understand why having a living son who works at a gas station is worse than having a dead son. The room gets really quiet and I can see some people don't know where to look. Then Ethan, because he apparently can't resist kicking someone when they're down, pulls out his wallet and throws a $20 bill across the table at me. It lands in my mashed potatoes. He says it's for gas since that's the only thing I'm qualified to handle. A few of his friends laugh. My father doesn't stop him. My mother doesn't stop him. Nobody stops him. And here's the thing, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even angry in that moment because this was exactly what I'd been waiting for. This was them showing 40 people, including family and business associates, exactly who they are. This was them burning every bridge with me publicly and completely. This was them making absolutely certain I would never feel obligated to help them with anything ever again. So, I did exactly what I'd planned to do months ago. I put down my fork very carefully. I looked around at every single face in that room. Some were embarrassed, some were entertained, some just looked uncomfortable. I smiled at all of them, genuinely smiled, and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone." Truly. Then I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out to my car. I didn't slam doors or make a scene or give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I just left, drove home to my apartment on the other side of Dallas, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and went to work at the gas station like normal. Zane asked if Thanksgiving was okay, and I said it was fine. I didn't tell him what happened because why would I? My coworker Anna, who works the afternoon shift, brought me leftover pie, and we talked about her classes because she's finishing her degree at community college. It was a completely normal day. Nobody from my family contacted me. Nobody apologized or checked if I was okay. Radio silence. Perfect. For the next 2 weeks, I went about my life exactly like always. Work, gym, occasional drinks with Zane and some friends from the gas station, who are more like family than my actual family ever was. I didn't reach out to my parents or Ethan. I didn't post anything dramatic on social media. I just existed in my normal life while they presumably celebrated Thanksgiving and moved forward with whatever trust changes my father had planned. Then around December 10th, something interesting started happening. My father called me. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that was basically asking if we could talk and saying some things needed to be discussed. Very formal, very stiff, like he was calling a business associate, not his son. I deleted it. 2 days later, Ethan texted me asking if I'd talk to Dad. I ignored it. My mother called and left a rambling message about how family is important and maybe we should have lunch. I deleted that too. By December 20th, the calls were getting more frequent. My father called twice in one day. Ethan called and actually said in his voicemail that they needed to discuss some business matters urgently. My mother texted saying it's Christmas soon and couldn't we put aside our differences? I didn't respond to any of it. I'd spent 3 years being erased from their lives and now suddenly they wanted to talk. Whatever they needed, they could figure it out themselves. Christmas passed and I spent it with Zane's family because they actually invited me and treated me like a person. My phone blew up on Christmas Day with calls from my entire family. My father, my mother, Ethan, even a few relatives I'd barely know. All wanting to talk, all saying it's important, all acting like I'm the one being unreasonable by not answering. I sent one text to my mother saying I'm spending Christmas with friends who actually like me. And then I turned off my phone for the rest of the day. After Christmas, the tone of the voicemails changed. My father started saying things about urgent business matters and legal issues that required my immediate attention. Ethan left a message saying they discovered some problems with company operations and needed my help understanding some files. My mother called crying, saying the family was falling apart and I needed to come home and fix this. Fix what? The family you publicly disowned me from. The business you specifically said I was too much of a failure to be part of. I saved every voicemail, but I didn't respond. By early January, the messages were getting desperate. My father called 5 times in one day. Ethan showed up at the gas station on a Tuesday afternoon in his expensive suit and his luxury SUV and actually tried to talk to me while I was working. I told him I was busy and he needed to leave. He said they were having serious problems with the business and needed my help going through some old files. I said that sounds like an Ethan problem since he's the one running the company now. He actually got angry and said I was being childish and this was serious. I told him to leave or I'd call the cops for trespassing. He left. The voicemails kept coming. My father saying, "Please call back." My mother begging me to at least let them explain what's happening. Ethan leaving increasingly frantic messages about contracts and client relationships and things falling apart. I still haven't responded to a single one. Because here's what they don't understand yet. Whatever crisis they're dealing with, whatever problems are destroying my father's precious business and reputation, I probably predicted it months or even years ago. I spent 18 months learning that company inside and out specifically so I would know exactly where the weaknesses were. I knew my father was building everything on his personal relationships and reputation. I knew Ethan didn't actually understand how anything worked. I knew that eventually someone would retire or a key relationship would change or some contract would come up for renewal and the whole carefully maintained illusion would start cracking. And now it's happening. Something has gone wrong with my father's business and Ethan can't fix it because he never learned how anything actually works. They need someone who understands the files, the relationships, the history, the actual operational details that my father never bothered teaching anyone because he was too busy protecting his ego and his control. They need someone who spent 18 months taking notes and making copies of everything important. They need me. And I'm sitting here in my apartment listening to my father sobbing into my voicemail about how everything he built is falling apart and I'm the only one who can help. And please just call him back. I'm listening to my mother cry about the family reputation being destroyed. I'm listening to Ethan panic about losing clients and contracts and everything falling through. 94 voicemails. 94 desperate pleas for help from the same people who publicly humiliated me and told 40 people I was a worthless disgrace who wasn't worth keeping in the family. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to finish this shift at the gas station. I'm going to go home and have dinner. I'm going to sleep really well tonight. And tomorrow, I'm going to listen to a few more of those voicemails just to hear exactly how bad things have gotten for them. Because I've been planning for this moment for 3 years. I've been building my own life and staying out of their way and waiting for them to realize they need me. And now that they do, now that they're desperate and scared and their perfect family empire is crashing down around them, now the real fun begins. Update 1. Okay, so I posted a few days ago about my family publicly cutting me out at Thanksgiving and then spending 2 months desperately calling me for help. A bunch of you told me to keep ignoring them, and a bunch more said I needed to at least find out what's going on before deciding my next move. I went with option 2, but not because I'm feeling generous. I wanted to hear them beg in person. Last Thursday, I finally responded to one of Ethan's texts. Just said I'd meet him Saturday morning at a diner near my apartment. Neutral territory, public place, and nowhere near their side of Dallas where someone might recognize us and give them social cover. I picked a place that's definitely not on any country club member's radar. Ethan tried to change it to somewhere in North Dallas, and I told him to take it or leave it. He took it. I got there early and grabbed a booth in the back. Ordered coffee and breakfast because I wasn't going to sit through this on an empty stomach. Ethan showed up 15 minutes late, which is typical for him. He walked in wearing jeans and a polo shirt, which immediately told me how desperate he was. Because Ethan doesn't do casual unless he's trying to seem relatable. He sat down across from me and tried to start with small talk about how I've been and whether I'm still at the gas station. I cut him off and said he had 30 minutes to explain why I should care about whatever crisis he's dealing with. He got defensive immediately, started saying I was being unreasonable, and this attitude was exactly why Dad never trusted me with real responsibility. Said I always had a chip on my shoulder about not being the favorite, and now I was acting like a child instead of being an adult about family obligations. I just sat there eating my eggs and let him talk himself out. When he finally stopped, I asked him again what the actual problem was. That's when he switched tactics. Suddenly, it was about how Dad's not doing well and the stress is killing him, and don't I care about that? How Mom's been crying every day because the family is falling apart. How I'm the one tearing everyone apart by refusing to help during a crisis. Real guilt trip stuff. I told him I watched Mom tell 40 people she pretends I'm dead. So, no, I'm not particularly concerned about her crying. Ethan actually had the nerve to say she didn't mean it like that and I was taking it too personally. So, I leaned forward and said I was taking it exactly as personally as it was intended, and he had 20 minutes left to tell me what he actually needed or I was leaving. He went quiet for a minute and then finally started talking about the real problem. Turns out there are actually 3 major issues happening at once, and they're all connected to the fact that my father built his entire business on personal relationships and reputation, and nobody else knows how to maintain them. First problem is their biggest client, a retail development group that's been with my father for almost 20 years. The main contact guy retired in November, and the new people reviewing their contractor relationships don't have any loyalty to my father or history with the company. They've been asking detailed questions about past projects and operational capacity, and apparently Ethan can't answer them because he doesn't actually know the details of how those projects were managed. The client is getting nervous and talking about putting the next development project out for competitive bid instead of just renewing with my father's company like they always have. Second problem is that one of their major ongoing projects hit a serious complication with the city permits office. Something about drainage requirements and environmental impact assessments that weren't properly filed. My father apparently always handled permit issues through his personal relationships with various city officials, but since his heart event, he hasn't been going to City Hall personally, and the people who owe him favors don't extend that courtesy to Ethan. So now they've got inspectors threatening to halt construction on a project that's already behind schedule and over budget. Third problem is that 2 of their most reliable subcontractors have both indicated they're not interested in bidding on the next project. These are electrical and plumbing contractors my father has used for 15 years. And apparently they're citing concerns about payment timelines and project management communication. Ethan swears they've paid everyone on time, but the contractors aren't budging and won't explain exactly what their issue is. I listened to all this and didn't say anything for a minute. Then I asked Ethan if he understood what all three of those problems had in common. He got irritated and said, "Obviously, they're all related to Dad not being as involved anymore." I said, "No, they're all related to the fact that Dad built a company based on relationships and trust and reputation, and nobody taught you how to maintain any of that because you were too busy being the pretty face at client dinners." Ethan got angry. Said, "I had no idea what I was talking about, and he's been working his tail off keeping things running while Dad recovered." Said the problems are just bad timing and bad luck, and they need access to old project files to answer the client's questions and some information about how Dad managed the city relationships. Said if I actually cared about the family business I built with Dad, I'd help them through this rough patch. I started laughing. I actually laughed in his face because the audacity was incredible. I asked him if he remembered Thanksgiving dinner. He said that was different and we were dealing with family business now, not personal drama. I asked if he remembered throwing money at me in front of 40 people. He said I needed to stop being so sensitive and let it go because this was more important. So I told him the truth. I told him I spent 18 months at that company making copies of every file, every contract, every client history, every vendor relationship, every single piece of operational information. I told him I have 3 complete backup hard drives with everything someone would need to understand or run that business. I told him I did it specifically because I knew eventually Dad would screw up and push me out, and I wanted to be ready when they inevitably needed me. Ethan went completely still. Then he asked where the drives were. I said that's not how this works. He asked what I wanted. I said I wanted an apology from Dad in front of the same 40 people who watched him humiliate me. I wanted my name put back in the family trust with equal standing to Ethan. I wanted a formal position in the company with real authority and real salary. I wanted Mom to tell everyone at the country club I'm actually alive, and I wanted Ethan to admit in front of Dad that he has no idea how to run the company without me. He said I was being ridiculous and vindictive. Said Dad would never agree to that, and I was basically trying to blackmail the family. I said call it whatever he wanted, but those were my terms. He said I was destroying Dad's legacy out of spite. I said Dad destroyed his own legacy when he built it on relationships nobody else could maintain. Ethan said I was a selfish piece of work and he'd been right at Thanksgiving that I didn't deserve to be part of the family. I stood up and put $20 on the table for my breakfast. Told him it was for the meal since that's all this conversation was worth. Then I left him sitting there. That was Saturday. By Sunday morning, my father called me directly. Not a voicemail, an actual call that I answered because I wanted to hear this. He started off trying to be diplomatic about how we should discuss the situation as reasonable adults. I said I'd given Ethan my terms and they stood. He said my terms were unacceptable and designed to humiliate him. I said, "Welcome to the club, Dad. I've been a member for 3 years." He said I was being childish and emotional and I needed to think about what was actually important here. So, I told him I'd been thinking about what was actually important for 3 years. I told him I thought about it every day. I went to work at a gas station while his wife told people I was dead. I told him I thought about it every time someone asked about my family. And I had to decide whether to explain I'd been disowned or just change the subject. I told him I knew exactly what was important, and apparently his business reputation and his relationship with his golden son were more important than treating his younger son like a human being. He tried a different approach. Started talking about how he built that company for the family and how it was supposed to be Ethan's inheritance and legacy. How I was essentially holding the family hostage over hurt feelings. How Mom was devastated that I wouldn't even talk to her. How Christmas was ruined because I wasn't there and everyone was worried about me. I asked him if he'd told those 40 Thanksgiving guests that Christmas was ruined. He went quiet. Then he said he might be willing to discuss bringing me into the company in some capacity if I provided the files they needed. Not as a partner, just as an employee helping with the transition, and maybe we could talk about the trust situation later once things stabilized. I said that wasn't even close to my terms and hung up. That's when things got interesting. Monday morning, my mother showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she got my address because I never gave it to her, but she was standing in the parking lot when I left for work. She tried to hug me and I stepped back. She started crying immediately and saying she's missed me so much and can't we please just talk about this as a family? I said we stopped being family when she told people I was dead and she needed to leave. She didn't leave. She followed me to my car and kept talking about how I don't understand the pressure she's been under and how Dad's heart event scared her and made her realize life is too short for this kind of estrangement. She said she never meant to hurt me and she was just trying to avoid awkward conversations at the club. She said I was being cruel by punishing her when she was trying to apologize. I turned around and asked her if she was apologizing for telling people I died or apologizing for getting caught. She didn't answer. I asked if she'd told anyone at the country club I'm actually alive yet. She said it's complicated and she needs time to figure out how to handle that conversation. I got in my car. She stood there crying and asking me not to do this to her. I went to work. Anna was there and asked if I was okay because apparently I looked tense. I said family stuff and she nodded and didn't push, which is why I actually like my coworkers. Around lunch, my phone started blowing up with texts from relatives. An aunt saying I should forgive my parents because family is everything. A cousin saying I'm being selfish and thinking only about myself. My uncle saying real men don't hold grudges and I need to grow up and help my father. Here's the thing. These are people who sat at that Thanksgiving table and watched my father humiliate me and didn't say a word. These are people who laughed when Ethan threw money at me. These are people who've ignored me for 3 years while my parents told everyone I was dead or a failure or both. And now they're all messaging me about family loyalty because my father's business problems are making everyone uncomfortable. I responded to exactly one text. My aunt who said family is everything. I texted back that she was right. And I learned at Thanksgiving exactly what my family thought I was worth. She didn't respond. Tuesday afternoon, Ethan showed up at the gas station again. This time, he brought his wife, Rose, who I haven't seen in over a year. She tried to be friendly and diplomatic about how everyone just wants to move past the hurt feelings and find a solution. I told her this didn't concern her and she should leave. She said she's family, too, and she cares about me and wants to help mediate. Ethan told her to let him handle it. Then Ethan tried to negotiate. Said, Dad was willing to offer me a junior partner position and a small percentage of trust distribution if I provided the files and helped them stabilize the business. Said it was a good offer and I should take it while it was available. I asked what percentage. He said 5%. I laughed and said, Ethan gets 50% of a company he can't run and I get 5% for saving it. He said I hadn't worked there in 3 years and hadn't earned a full partnership. I told him I earned it by being the only person who bothered to actually learn how the company works. I told him his 50% was going to be worth nothing when all their clients leave and the projects fall apart and Dad's reputation is destroyed. I told him my terms hadn't changed and if anything they were getting worse because now I'm annoyed that he brought his wife to my workplace. Rose tried to jump in and say everyone needs to calm down and be reasonable. I told her she had no idea what she was talking about and needed to stay out of it. Ethan got in my face and said I don't talk to his wife that way. I told him to get out of my gas station before I called the cops for harassment. A customer walked in and they both left. That night, my father left a voicemail saying if I didn't provide the files by Friday, he was going to pursue legal action for theft of company property. Said I had no right to take those documents and I was going to face consequences if I didn't return them immediately. I saved the voicemail because it's going to be hilarious to play back to him later. Here's what he doesn't understand. Those documents aren't theft. I made copies while I was an employee with full access to company files. I didn't take originals. I didn't steal anything. I backed up information I had legitimate access to at the time. And even if he wants to argue it's intellectual property or confidential information, he'd have to admit in legal proceedings that his company is completely dependent on files his failure son copied 3 years ago. He'd have to admit he never bothered to teach his golden child how anything works. He'd have to admit publicly that his entire business is falling apart because the one son he threw away was the only one who understood it. He won't do it. He can't do it because the one thing Jeffrey values more than money is his reputation. And admitting all this would destroy it completely. So now it's Wednesday night and I'm sitting here with 98 new voicemails and probably 200 texts and my family is losing their minds. The client deadline is apparently next week. The city inspectors are talking about issuing stop work orders. The contractors still won't commit to the next project, and my family is scrambling and panicking and trying every manipulation tactic they can think of to get me to save them. And I'm going to let them panic a little longer because 3 years is a long time to be dead to your family. And I think they've earned some real consequences for that. Several of you asked what my endgame is here. Honestly, I'm still deciding. Part of me wants to watch the whole thing burn. Part of me wants to make them suffer through every humiliation they put me through. Part of me wants to take the company away from Ethan completely just to prove I can. But mostly I want them to understand that you can't treat people like garbage and then expect them to save you when you need help. I'll update again soon. This is far from over. You guys asked for another update, so here it is. And honestly, it's gotten way more complicated than I expected. Some of you said I should just let them crash and burn. Others said I should negotiate from a position of strength. And a few said I was being too harsh. Well, buckle up because the harsh part hasn't even started yet. So, when I left off on Wednesday, my family was spiraling and I was letting them panic. By Thursday morning, things escalated in ways I didn't predict. My father showed up at the gas station at 6 o'clock in the morning. Not Ethan this time. My actual father, Jeffrey, who hasn't set foot in a place like this in probably 30 years. He walked in while I was doing inventory and just stood there in his expensive casual clothes looking completely out of place. I ignored him and kept counting stock. He waited until the only customer left and then said we needed to talk immediately. I told him I was working and he could make an appointment like everyone else. He said this couldn't wait and he needed 5 minutes. I said he couldn't afford my hourly rate for 5 minutes. He actually pulled out his wallet and tried to hand me money. I told him to get out before I banned him from the property. That's when he switched tactics and said the company lost the major retail client. They pulled the contract yesterday after Ethan couldn't answer basic questions about project management capabilities and past performance metrics. I kept doing inventory. He said that client represented almost 30% of their annual revenue and without them the company couldn't sustain current operations. Said they'd have to lay off half the staff within a month and probably close down 2 ongoing projects. Said 20 years of relationship building was destroyed because Ethan couldn't provide documentation that I supposedly had. I asked him if he tried checking his own files. He said I knew perfectly well that he kept most of the important relationship history and project details in his head, and in personal files that Ethan didn't have access to. So I looked at him and asked whose fault that was. Asked why he built an entire company on information only he controlled. Asked why he never bothered teaching Ethan how anything actually worked beyond schmoozing clients over expensive dinners. He said that wasn't the point and I was being deliberately obtuse. Said I knew exactly what information they needed and I was sabotaging the family business out of spite. I told him I didn't sabotage anything. He sabotaged it himself by treating his younger son like garbage for 3 years and then expecting him to fix everything when the golden child failed. He said, I was twisting the situation and making this about Thanksgiving when it was about the family legacy. I said the family legacy was built on his ego and his need for control. And now he was learning what happens when you burn bridges with the only person who actually paid attention. He left. I finished my shift. Zane came in for the afternoon and asked if that was my father because he'd never seen someone look so uncomfortable in a gas station. I said, yeah. And Zane said he seemed upset. I said, good. That afternoon, things got messy because my mother started calling relatives and apparently telling them I was refusing to help Dad during a health crisis. My phone blew up with messages from cousins and aunts and uncles saying I should be ashamed of myself for abandoning family when Dad's heart condition made stress dangerous. Saying I was basically trying to kill my father by refusing to help, saying they couldn't believe I was this selfish and cruel. I didn't respond to any of them, but I saved every message because the manipulation was impressive. Then Friday morning, Rose showed up at my apartment alone. Ethan's wife, who I'd told to stay out of this. She knocked on my door at 7 o'clock in the morning, and when I opened it, she immediately started talking about how she's worried about Ethan, and the stress is destroying him, how he's not sleeping and barely eating and spending every day trying to put out fires at the company, how their marriage is suffering because he's so consumed with trying to save his father's business, and I'm the only person who can help. I asked her why she thought that was my problem. She said, "Because I'm Ethan's brother, and family helps each other." I said Ethan threw money at my face and told me I was worthless. So apparently family doesn't help each other in this case. She said he was just following Dad's lead and trying to support him during a difficult time. Said Ethan actually felt bad about Thanksgiving, but Dad had made it clear that's how things were going to be and Ethan didn't want to make waves. That was interesting. I asked her what she meant by Dad made it clear. She got uncomfortable and said she probably shouldn't have mentioned it. I said no, she should definitely explain what she meant. She said that before Thanksgiving, Dad had apparently told Ethan the family trust changes were happening and Ethan needed to show he was fully on board with Dad's decisions about my involvement going forward. That the whole public announcement was partly a test to see if Ethan would back Dad's play completely. So, I stood there processing that my father had basically orchestrated the entire Thanksgiving humiliation as some kind of loyalty test for Ethan. Had told my brother exactly how things would go down and made sure Ethan performed his role in cutting me out. Rose saw my expression and started backtracking. Said she didn't mean it like that and maybe she misunderstood what Ethan told her. Said the important thing was moving forward and helping the family. Now I asked her to leave. She said she was trying to help. I said she just told me my father planned the whole Thanksgiving disaster like some kind of power play and now she wanted me to forget about it and save his business. She said family is complicated and I needed to be the bigger person. I closed the door on her. Then I called Ethan. He answered immediately and started talking about how they needed to meet again to discuss reasonable compromises. I cut him off and asked him if Dad told him beforehand what was going to happen at Thanksgiving. He went quiet. I asked if Dad told him to throw money at me as part of the show. He said it wasn't like that and I was misunderstanding the situation. I said Rose just told me everything and I wanted to hear it from him. Ethan said Dad had mentioned making some announcements about the trust and asked Ethan to support his decisions. Said Dad wanted to make a clear statement about expectations and standards. Said Ethan knew I'd been disappointing Dad for years and this was just making it official. I asked about the money. He said that was his own decision and maybe it was harsh, but I'd been so smug about working at a gas station, like it made me better than everyone. And he wanted to make a point. I asked what point exactly. He said the point that actions have consequences and I couldn't just abandon the family and expect to be treated like I mattered. I told him that was rich coming from someone who couldn't run a company without the brother he'd publicly humiliated. He said I was never going to let this go and we couldn't move forward if I kept dwelling on past drama. I said there was no moving forward and hung up. Saturday was when my father showed up at my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up to pounding on my door and when I opened it, he pushed past me into my living room. He looked terrible. Hadn't shaved, clothes wrinkled, clearly hadn't been sleeping. He started talking immediately about how I was destroying everything he'd built and I needed to understand the bigger picture here. I told him to get out. He said no. We were going to have this conversation right now. He said the city had issued the stop work order on Friday and the project was officially halted pending environmental compliance review. Said that project was supposed to generate enough profit to cover operating costs for the next quarter and without it they were going to miss payroll. Said the 2 contractors who pulled out had apparently been talking to other subcontractors and now 3 more were expressing concerns about working with the company. I asked him again to leave. He said I didn't understand how bad this was. Said he'd spent 30 years building this company and his reputation and I was letting it all collapse because I got my feelings hurt at a family dinner. Said Mom was falling apart watching everything crumble. Said Ethan was drowning trying to manage things he'd never been trained to handle. Said I was the only person who could fix this and I was choosing revenge over family. So, I told him the truth about why I worked at that gas station. Told him I didn't have a breakdown or give up on my career. I made a strategic choice to remove myself from his company while keeping all the knowledge of how it operated. Told him I spent 18 months learning every detail specifically so I'd have leverage when he inevitably screwed me over. Told him I knew he'd eventually push me out because he's a control freak who couldn't stand having a son who questioned his methods. He said I was delusional if I thought I'd planned this. Said I was just a kid who couldn't handle corporate pressure and ran away to work at a gas station. Said I was retrofitting a narrative to make my failure look like some kind of strategic genius. I pulled out my phone and showed him the metadata on my backup drives. Showed him dates from 3 years ago when I'd systematically backed up every file. Showed him folder structures that proved I'd organized everything by client, project, contractor, financial relationship. He stared at my phone screen. Then he asked what I wanted. I said I'd already told Ethan my terms. He said my terms were designed to humiliate him and were completely unacceptable. I said then we had nothing to discuss. He said I was destroying the family over ego. I said he destroyed the family when he orchestrated Thanksgiving as a loyalty test for Ethan and treated me like a prop in his power play. He actually looked surprised that I knew. Then he said that wasn't what happened and Rose didn't understand the context. I said the context was that he's a manipulative control freak who pitted his sons against each other their entire lives. Said he treated me like a backup plan and when I didn't perform exactly how he wanted, he decided I was worthless. Said he couldn't stand that I actually understood his business better than his golden child did. That hit something. His whole face changed and he said I had no idea what I was talking about. Said he'd built that company from nothing and I showed up after all the hard work was done and thought I deserved credit. Said Ethan had dedicated his life to the family business while I ran away at the first sign of pressure. Said I was jealous of Ethan's success and now I was trying to destroy it. I asked him if Ethan was so successful, why was the company falling apart without me? Asked why the golden child couldn't answer basic client questions. Asked why Dad never bothered teaching Ethan actual operational skills if he was so dedicated. He said Ethan was learning and would have figured it out if I hadn't sabotaged everything by taking the files. I said I didn't take anything. I copied information I had legitimate access to. And the fact that the company couldn't function without my copies proved Ethan never learned anything real. My father said I was being vindictive and destroying 20 years of work to prove a point. I said he was losing 20 years of work because he built it on relationships nobody else could maintain and information nobody else had access to. Said that was his failure as a businessman and as a father. He called me an ungrateful brat who'd been handed opportunities most people never get. I told him to get out of my apartment. He didn't leave. He said we weren't done. And I needed to hear what he had to say. Started talking about how he'd made mistakes, but he was trying to do what was best for the family. How he'd always pushed me hard because he saw potential in me. How the Thanksgiving thing went too far, but it was meant to motivate me to take things seriously. I told him that was revisionist nonsense. And I remembered every word he said that night. Then he tried a different angle. Said Mom's health was suffering from the stress. Said she'd been having panic attacks because the country club situation was getting complicated. Apparently, someone had asked about me recently and Mom panicked and said I was traveling abroad for work. Said she'd backed herself into multiple lies trying to maintain the fiction I didn't exist and now she was terrified someone would find out the truth. Said Mom couldn't handle the social embarrassment if people learned she'd been lying for 3 years. I told him that was Mom's problem to solve. He said I was being cruel to a woman who loved me. I said she loved me so much she told people I died rather than admit I worked at a gas station. He said she was trying to protect the family reputation. I said she was trying to protect her social status and I wasn't interested in enabling her anymore. He stood there for a minute breathing hard. Then he said if I provided the files and helped stabilize the company, he'd make sure I got a fair settlement from the trust when he died. Not equal to Ethan, but something substantial. Said that was the best offer I'd get and I should take it. I said my terms hadn't changed and if anything they'd gotten worse because he broke into my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning. He left. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Sunday, my phone had messages from everyone. Ethan saying Dad told him about our conversation and they needed to find a compromise. Mom saying I needed to forgive Dad because he was under so much pressure. Rose apologizing for telling me about Thanksgiving, but saying she hoped I understood everyone was just trying to help. Multiple relatives saying I was tearing the family apart. Monday morning I had to work and I was exhausted. Anna asked if I was okay and I said family stuff again. She said her family was complicated too and sometimes the only thing you could do was set boundaries and stick to them. She said it looked like I was doing that and it was hard but probably necessary. It was the most insightful thing anyone had said to me in weeks. That afternoon, Ethan called and said they needed to talk in person one more time. Say Dad had authorized him to negotiate real terms. I said I'd meet him Tuesday evening at the same diner. He agreed. Which brings me to right now. It's Monday night and I'm supposed to meet Ethan tomorrow. And apparently they're finally ready to actually negotiate. Some of you told me to hold firm. Some said I should ask for even more than my original terms. Some said I should let the whole thing burn and walk away completely. Here's what I'm thinking. I spent 3 years being dead to these people. 3 years watching them act like I didn't exist while I built my own life and waited for this exact situation. They're desperate now. Really desperate. The business is failing. Dad's reputation is crumbling. Mom's social lies are catching up to her. Ethan's realizing he's completely unequipped to handle any of this. And I have all the leverage. I have the information they need. I have the knowledge to fix their problems. I have the power to save or destroy everything my father built. The question is, what do I actually want from this? Do I want to watch them suffer until they lose everything? Do I want to force them into humiliating concessions? Do I want to take over the company completely and push Ethan out the way he pushed me out? I've got about 20 hours to decide. And whatever I choose, it's going to define how this ends for all of us. What would you do? Final update. All right, everyone. This is the final update. For those who said I should make them suffer, you're going to love this. For those who said I was being too harsh, I don't care because I got exactly what I wanted. Tuesday evening, I met Ethan at the diner. Except he wasn't alone. My father came with him. They sat across from me looking exhausted and desperate. My father started talking about finding realistic middle ground because the business situation had gotten critical. The stop work order was costing thousands per day. 2 more contractors had pulled out that morning. Projects were behind schedule because subcontractors would only deal with my father personally and he wasn't available. Ethan said they were offering me 25% stake in the company, VP position with real authority and restoration to the family trust with equal distribution. He said it was generous considering I hadn't worked there in 3 years. I laughed at them, asked if they seriously thought that was generous after everything. My father said it was more than fair. I pulled out my phone and started listing specific things from my backup drives. Named the client my father promised preferential pricing to for early renewals. Named the city inspector he took to Cowboys games to smooth permit issues. Named the contractor who'd been overbilling for 3 years, but Dad kept using because they were college roommates. Named the property deal where environmental assessments were fudged, and my father called in favors to make it go away. They went silent. My father asked how I knew those things. I said I knew everything because I spent 18 months paying attention. Said I had documentation of every questionable relationship and every corner cut. Said, if they wanted to threaten legal action, I'd be happy to have Discovery review those business practices. My father's face went red. I laid out my real terms. 50% ownership, equal partnership with Ethan, full operational control. Father steps back to advisory only, majority share of trust, and a formal family meeting with the same 40 people from Thanksgiving where Dad publicly apologizes. Ethan said that was insane. My father said I was trying to steal his company. I said I was trying to save a failing business. Said I had a good job and didn't need any of this. Then I mentioned I'd been contacted by one of their former clients asking if I'd be interested in consulting. My father sat back down. That's when my mother walked in. She'd been waiting in the parking lot and Ethan texted her. She immediately started talking about family and stress and needing to stop punishing everyone. I told her to leave. She sat down and said no. She had a right to be part of this conversation. I asked if she'd told her country club friends I was alive yet. She went pale, said that wasn't relevant. I said it was completely relevant because she'd spent 3 years lying about my existence. She started crying and said I was being cruel. My father tried to redirect. Said if I took operational control, all the current problems would become mine to fix. Said I'd be walking into a disaster and if I couldn't fix it, the company would fail anyway and it would be on me. He had this look like he'd found a trap. I smiled and said I'd already figured out how to fix everything. Said the client could be recovered with documentation I had. Said the stop work order could be resolved with proper environmental filings I knew how to do. Said contractors could be brought back by addressing their actual concerns. My father asked how I knew their concerns. I said because I'd called them last week and asked complete silence. Ethan said I'd been talking to their contractors. I said I'd been having friendly conversations with people I used to work with. Said they'd shared interesting perspectives on why they didn't trust Ethan's project management capabilities. My father looked ready to explode. He asked what it would take for me to fix immediate problems without ownership changes. I said no. Said I wasn't fixing anything until I had legal documentation. Pulled out papers from my jacket. Said I'd already had an attorney draw a partnership agreement and trust amendment. Just needed signatures. My father grabbed the papers and read them. Said this gave me majority control over every decision and reduced him to a figurehead. I said that was correct. He threw the papers at me, said he'd never sign. I started to leave. My mother grabbed my arm, begging me to stay. I pulled away and said they'd had 3 years. Then I told them everything. Told them I'd known since working at the company that he'd eventually cut me out. That I'd spent 18 months deliberately learning everything specifically so I'd have leverage when he turned on me. That the gas station job was strategic retreat to wait for them to need me. That I'd predicted he'd use a family gathering to publicly disown me and I'd been ready for it. That Thanksgiving was perfect because he'd burned every bridge so completely I'd never feel guilty about what came next. My father said I was sick. Said, what kind of person plans revenge for 3 years? I said, the kind whose family treats them like garbage. Ethan said I was a manipulative psychopath. I said I was someone who paid attention and planned ahead. My father asked why I wanted the company if I hated them. I said I didn't particularly want it, but I wasn't going to let them keep it after how they treated me. He said that was petty and vindictive. I said I learned from the best. My phone rang. The contractor called back asking about consulting. I answered it right there and said I'd probably be available soon. Hung up and looked at my family. Something shifted in my father's expression. He asked if he signed. Would I fix everything? Said yes. He asked how fast. I gave him specific timelines for each problem. He picked up the papers and read through them again slowly. Then he signed, told Ethan to sign. Ethan refused at first, but my father said if he didn't, they'd lose everything anyway. Ethan signed. I laid out what happened next. I'd fix the client, the city issues, the contractors. But first, they were hosting another family gathering, same 40 people, and my father would explain his mistake about my capabilities and that I was now full partner. My mother said she couldn't face those people. I said she'd earned it. My father said it was unnecessary. I said it was non-negotiable. The next 3 days I fixed everything. Met with the major client Friday with complete documentation and performance metrics. They restored the contract with 6-month probationary period, went to City Hall, and worked with inspectors on compliance plan. They agreed to lift stop work order, called every contractor, and had honest conversations about improved project management. Most came back. By Monday, the immediate crisis was resolved. My father called asking how everything went. I told him. He said he'd plan the family gathering for next month. I said this Saturday or I walk away. He agreed. Saturday evening, the same 40 people showed up at their house. I sat in the same seat from Thanksgiving. Everyone was confused why I was there. My father stood up and announced he'd made a serious error about my capabilities. Said I'd been at a gas station while maintaining complete business knowledge. Said recent problems revealed I understood operations better than he'd realized. Said I was now full partner with operational control. The room was silent. My father said he'd underestimated my contributions and his Thanksgiving statements were unfair. Said problems were resolved when I stepped in. Then my mother stood up and said she'd been telling people at the country club I died 3 years ago. Said it was a lie and she was ashamed. Several people gasped. Dinner was incredibly awkward. Ethan left early. My mother hid in the kitchen. I watched everyone process what they'd witnessed. Since then, I've been managing company operations. Ethan barely speaks to me. My father is technically president, but I make all decisions. My mother is telling people at the club there was a misunderstanding about me being overseas. But here's the thing. I don't want to run this company long term. I liked my life at the gas station with people who respected me. So, in 6 months, when everything is stable, I'm selling my shares back to my father at market value. I'll take that money and do what I want with it. Maybe help Zane with his second location. Maybe go back to school. Maybe just live quietly. But my family will know forever that their company only survived because the son they threw away saved it. They'll know the gas station employee they were ashamed of understood business better than their golden child. My father's reputation is damaged because everyone knows his company almost failed and I had to save it. My mother's social standing is destroyed because everyone knows she lied. Ethan's image as business heir is revealed as hollow. That's my revenge. Not destruction, but truth. Not letting them fail, but making them succeed only by admitting they needed me. Making them publicly acknowledge everything they did wrong. And in 6 months, I'll walk away anyway and leave them with a functioning business they'll always know they didn't deserve. They have to live with succeeding because of me. That's going to eat at them for years. To everyone who said I should let it burn. I thought about it, but this is better. To everyone who said I was too harsh, I don't care. They earned every bit of this. Thanks for following this story. I'm done with updates now. I've got a company to run for 6 months and then a life to build on my own terms. Happy endings aren't about reconciliation. Sometimes they're about making people who hurt you face consequences and then walking away stronger than they ever were.